So, what does it really take to become an entrepreneur? I mean, really? Is it some world-changing idea that nobody's ever had before? A pile of startup cash? Well, the truth is, it's a marathon, and it starts way before you ever sell a single thing. It all begins with your mindset. Let's dive in and unpack what that really means.
So here's the game plan. First, we're going to tackle the most important piece of the puzzle, the mindset. Then, we'll see how to turn your passion into an actual plan. After that, we'll check out some real-world side hustles, what worked and what really didn't. Then we'll get into the long game of building a brand, and finally, we'll talk about the one thing every entrepreneur needs to get good at, failure.
All right, let's get right to it. What's the one thing? The one thing that every successful entrepreneur has in common. Here's a hint. It's not $1 million idea. It's a feeling. You know, we've all heard it 1,000 times. To start a business, you've got to have that killer, revolutionary idea. You need to find that tiny little gap in the market that no one else has spotted. But what if that whole way of thinking is just wrong?
This is where entrepreneur Simon Squibb completely flips the script. He says a business doesn't start with some brilliant idea you find out in the world. Nope, it starts with an internal drive, a gut instinct, that little voice inside you that says, hey, maybe it's time for a change. It's less about the concept and way more about a deep need to just build something.
So instead of chasing some random market gap, Squibb's advice is way simpler. Build something around what you genuinely love. Because that passion, that obsession, that's your secret weapon. That's your competitive edge when things get really, really tough. And suddenly, it's not about work-life balance. It's about syncing your life and your work together. It changes the entire question from, what am I going to do, to what problem do I actually care about solving?
Okay, so you found that passion, that problem you care about. But how in the world do you turn that feeling into an actual, concrete plan? Well, that brings us right to our next section, mapping out the journey.
First things first, throw out that old-school, rigid business plan. You know the one I'm talking about. It's like a straitjacket that can literally suffocate a new idea before it has a chance to breathe. The alternative? A mind map. It's fluid, it's free, and it lets you stay nimble. You can be like a boxer, ready to bob and weave and adapt to whatever the market throws at you.
And getting started is so simple. Seriously, just take a piece of paper and put your passion, your hobby, right there in the middle. From there, just let your brain go wild. Start branching out to the business you could build around it. Explore every single possibility, new products, who you might need on your team, how you'd make money. And then you just start connecting the dots. It becomes this living, breathing blueprint for your entire vision.
All right, we've got the mindset, we've got the map. Now it's time to actually hit the road and see how this plays out in the real world. Let's take a look at some field reports from the front lines of side hustles.
Now, just for a quick refresher, a side hustle is exactly what it sounds like. It's that thing you work on in the evenings, on the weekends, all while you're still holding down your day job. For a lot of people, it's that first taste of financial freedom, and it's the perfect low-risk lab to test out your ideas. Okay, this table tells such a powerful story. Just look at the crazy difference in startup costs and the results. On one end of the spectrum, you have a digital product business that was launched for literally 20 cents. And on the other end, you have a physical product business that just burned through thousands of pounds. Let's just zoom in on this for a second. Over $22,000 in revenue. Tatiana Savage started her Etsy shop selling digital templates with one single listing that cost her 20 cents. This right here is the incredible power of a low-cost, high-leverage business built on the magic of passive income.
And now let's look at the other side of that coin, a net loss of 2,300 pounds. Ouch. This venture, making custom phone cases, needed a huge upfront investment in a special printer and a ton of materials. It's just a brutal reminder that a bigger investment doesn't mean a bigger return. In fact, sometimes it just means a much bigger risk.
And then there's this third category of side hustle, the classic trading time for money model. Substitute teaching brought in a steady $11 an hour. But here's the catch. There's a hard ceiling on that. There's zero scalability. You only get paid for the hours you're physically there on the clock.
So the huge takeaway here is that not all money is created equal, right? Some paths hit a dead end, while others have basically unlimited potential. And that brings us to the real key, playing the long game by building your brand to win.
So what's the secret weapon for playing the long game? It's all about delayed gratification. It's the core principle Simon Squibb says is behind his success. It's about having the discipline to resist that quick, easy buck today in order to build something of true, lasting value tomorrow.
You see, a business makes money, but a brand creates an identity. It creates loyalty. It's your reputation. It's what people say about you when you're not even in the room. I mean, think about it. Giants like Facebook and Google spent years just giving people immense value for free before they even really thought about making a profit. They built the brand first, and that brand became their single most valuable asset.
But building a brand isn't just about creating something valuable. It's also about protecting it. This quote from Logan Paul, after a huge public controversy, is just a chilling reminder of how fragile a personal brand can be. It can take years and years to build and literally seconds to destroy. That's why managing it is so critical.
And that brings us to our final and maybe the most powerful tool in the entire entrepreneur's toolkit, failure. It's all about learning how to lose because, let's be real, every single journey is going to involve it.
Here's a wild thought from Simon Squibb that might hit a little close to home. Why do so many top-of-their-class, straight-A students end up working for the kids who barely scraped by? Well, he argues it's because our entire school system teaches us that failing is the worst thing you can possibly do. A students are programmed to avoid risks at all costs, but entrepreneurs, they have to learn how to run straight towards them.
So how do you get good at failing? Well, you have to check your ego at the door. You have to start seeing failure not as some personal indictment, but as data. It's just information. Remember that $2,300 loss on the phone cases? That wasn't a total failure. It was a really expensive but priceless lesson in market research and startup costs. The key is to remember that even if you lose it all, you can always get back in the ring and go again.
So there you have it. The path is actually pretty clear. You combine your passion with a flexible plan, you're smart about the risks you take, you play the long game by building a brand, and most importantly, you learn to embrace failure as your greatest teacher. So the only real question left is the one we started with. What problem are you going to choose to solve?